royal prep, it's almost time for dance class to begin. Sofia and the other princesses are stretching when Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather float in. May I have your attention, please? Flora says. We won't be having dance class today. Instead, you'll be preparing for a very important test. The princess test. Merryweather adds. Sofia has no idea what a princess test might be. Before she can ask, Fauna explains, the princess test is your chance to show us everything you've learned about being a true princess. Everything. Princess June exclaims. But we've learned so much. The fairies tell them that the test will take place in the ballroom right after school. Good luck, everyone, Fauna says as the fairies flutter out. Sofia, Amber, June, and Hildegard go to the library to prepare for the princess test. The librarian, Mrs. Higgins, finds them some books to study and wishes them luck. Sofia pages through a book. Do they really expect us to know all these things, she wonders? Banquet manners? Tea party conversation? The other princesses don't seem worried. You'll do fine, Sofia, June says. But I haven't been a princess very long, Sofia reminds the others. There's so much I don't know. Just make sure your gown looks gorgeous, like mine, and you'll do fine, Amber assures her. That's the most important thing to know about being a princess. Hildegard flips open her fan. But proper fan fluttering is a must, too. Sofia hopes she can remember everything they're telling her. Especially since it's almost time for the test to start. You go ahead, Sofia says as the others head for the ballroom. I want to make sure my dress looks perfect. The other princesses pass Mrs. Higgins. Princess Amber, the librarian calls. Can you help me? I wish I could, Mrs. Higgins, Amber replies. But the princess test is about to start. I understand, dear, Mrs. Higgins says. She asks June and Hildegard for help, too. But both girls apologize and hurry past. Finally, Sofia comes along. What's the matter, Mrs. Higgins? She asks. Oh, thank you for stopping, the librarian cries. I have to bring these books home, but my wheelbarrow broke and I can't carry them myself. Will you help me? I don't live far, just down the path a wee bit. Sofia glances toward the ballroom, not sure what to do. Mrs. Higgins smiles hopefully. Sofia sighs and smiles back. Of course I'll help you, she says. She's sure she still has enough time before the princess test starts. The two of them gather the books and head off down the path. Before long, Mrs. Higgins points ahead. My cottage is just across this bridge. Oh, Huckleberry! She exclaims. A tree has fallen on the footbridge. How are we going to get to your cottage? Sofia wonders. Well, there's another way, Mrs. Higgins says. But it'll take a bit longer. Sofia gulps. Longer? But that might make me late for the princess test. I'll understand if you need to go back, Mrs. Higgins says. I'll be okay on my own. Sofia thinks about it. Then she shakes her head. I can't let you carry all these heavy books yourself, Mrs. Higgins. Lead the way. Sofia and Mrs. Higgins walk for a while. Is your cottage far from here? Sofia asks. Not really, Mrs. Higgins says cheerfully. I'll draw you a map. She scribbles in the dirt with a stick. Maybe we should keep going, Mrs. Higgins? Sofia suggests. Yes, indeed. Mrs. Higgins gestures toward a narrow pass between two boulders. After you, my dear. Sofia steps forward. Then she stops. I'm so sorry, she says. A proper princess would say after you. Mrs. Higgins smiles. You are a proper princess. Not really. Sofia sighs. I wasn't born a princess, so sometimes I feel like I have to keep proving I belong. Mrs. Higgins pats her shoulder. From what I've seen, Sofia, I think you make a wonderful princess. Sofia and Mrs. Higgins continue on their way. Soon they reach a rushing stream. Where's the bridge? Sofia asks. Mrs. Higgins chuckles. We don't need a bridge. We can just walk across the rocks. Just then Sofia hears the school bell ring in the distance. Oh, no, she cries. The princess test is starting. I'd better hurry. Follow me. Mrs. Higgins skips across the stream on the rocks. Sofia follows, but the rocks are slippery, and her fan flies into the water. My fan! Sofia cries, watching the water swirl her fan away. Hildegard said the fan is a really important part of the princess test. Now I lost it and I'm late. What am I going to do? Mrs. Higgins offers again to let Sofia turn back. But Sofia knows the books are too heavy for one person. I'm not leaving until we get you home, she says. Besides, my gown still looks nice. My sister said that's the most important part of the test. Did she? Mrs. Higgins says. My cottage is just through those trees. Soon Sofia spots the cottage. It's not far, but the path passes right through a muddy bog. Once again, Mrs. Higgins offers to let Sofia turn back. But Sofia has a better idea. She holds up the edge of her gown to keep it clean. There's just one problem, the mud is slippery. Halfway across, Mrs. Higgins slips and falls. I've got you. Sofia cries, trying to catch her. They both end up falling in the mud. Sofia's gown is filthy. I'm so sorry, Sofia, Mrs. Higgins says. But I couldn't have made it home without you. Thank you. Mrs. Higgins's words make Sofia feel better. You're welcome, she says. I may not have made it to the princess test, but at least we got you home. Don't give up on that test yet. Mrs. Higgins says. Come this way. She leads Sofia into her cottage, which transforms into the royal prep ballroom. All the other princesses are there, along with Flora and Merryweather. Sofia! Amber exclaims. Where'd you come from? And what happened to your dress? Sofia is confused, especially when she sees a second Mrs. Higgins standing nearby. The first Mrs. Higgins pulls out a wand and transforms into Fauna. Elle used magic to make myself look like Mrs. Higgins, Fauna explains. It was all part of the princess test. One of the most important things about being a princess is kindness. A true princess always helps a person in need. Flora nods. Even if it means giving up something very important to you. Amber Amber and the other princesses all end up doing well on the princess test. The fairies reward them with sparkly silver stars. But Sofia was the only one who stopped to help Mrs. Higgins, so she wins a special gold trophy. "Can I hold it?" Amber asks eagerly. "Oh, Amber." Sofia giggles, glad to know that she really does belong.